Hello, everyone. Ian Hamilton with Good Virtual Reality here, joined by Anton Hand. Why don't you introduce yourself, Anton, and tell us where you're tuned in from today?
Hello, hello. I'm Anton Hand of RUST LTD, and I'm coming to you from Los Angeles.
How do you get introduced to VR for the first time?
So I was a student at the University of Buffalo, and I was a fine arts student at the time. I was really interested in 3D art and animation. But it's a public university. We're talking about the early 2000s here. And so the amount of things that, especially when you're in a place like Western New York, this isn't like it wasn't like I was going to school in Los Angeles sort of thing. I'm not experiencing the state of the art. So pretty much the only expression of 3D art that was available that I had access to in the art department was stuff that was more geared towards advertising, motion graphics, etc. And that wasn't what was really compelling to me. I wanted to do animated shorts. I wanted to do game cinematics. And I had been basically like trending towards dropping out of undergrad out of boredom, out of just like, there's nothing here for me that I feel passionate about. And a computer science instructor, actually, because I was taking intro to comp sci for the lulls. Um, and noticed that I was like, oh, what's the weird art gothy kid who sits in the back of the lecture hall doing chainmail all lecture? What's he about? Took me out to lunch, and he was like, there's some interesting people over in this other department, the digital media studies department, doing virtual reality stuff and doing more interesting 3D animation stuff. And so I went over, I ended up getting connected, got a tour, walked into the single wall, low budget cave setup that that department had that was run by Josephine Anstey and Dave Pape at the time. And it just completely blew my mind. It was absolutely incredible. It was, especially being a 3D artist from the age of 10, being like, wait, you're telling me I can make a thing and then I can step into it? And it was a sold immediately kind of my was like, it became my hyper fixation at that time of, I'm going to take every class that has this. I'm going to spend every single minute I possibly can with access to this and learn everything I can.
Can you think of a specific moment of presence in a headset that is your favorite or the best moment of presence that you've ever had?
Yeah, absolutely. This one's so easy for me. It was when, like, 150 hours into playing Elite Dangerous, which I had played entirely in a headset, that I finally had leveled myself up enough to get access to the Soul system and to fly around it. And I mean, that entire experience of Elite was just back to back to back to back. Like, that is a game when it's in VR that is fundamentally about experiencing a scale that your brain was not built for, that what or did not evolve for whatsoever, and trying to reckon with scale and distance and time. And yeah, for that, the I don't think I've ever been transported to somewhere else as utterly as the time that I spent in that game. And I think there's the first time in Elite that I did the unpowered stealth where you sneak into a docking port by basically boosting at the docking port as perfectly as you can, shutting off everything in your ship so that the scanners don't see you, and then turning it on at the last minute without pancaking yourself on the inside of the docking ring. The first time I landed on a planet in Elite, which I did so without looking up how to do it, and didn't realize I was landing on a hard planet, i.e. like G, and coming down because of the path on the night side. So landing for like, it took like 20 some minutes to come down onto this planet because I wasn't doing it quite correctly. And I'm like landing in the dark, and so can just see the like running light telemetry of the planet's surface and hearing the cockpit shake. And I have never been like in a moment in virtual reality more than that. And so I measure everything else against it.
So how did you get introduced to modern VR? What was your path into these consumer headsets that we've got over the last decade or so?
I mean, it was funny because I remember seeing, I was in grad school at the time, and you sort of, the news of the like Kickstarter was spread around, and I saw it as someone who had like done VR and experienced, like, is it going to be a thing? I guess no, it's not. sort of thing. I was like, well, as one of the few people out there looking at this news who has made real, has put a substantive chunk of my life into making art in this medium to begin with, even though I don't have much money, I was a poor grad student. I was like, I feel obligated as a practitioner of the media to just put my chips in because I didn't even expect it to like hit its goal. I was like, well, this is clearly not going to work, but here. And so I probably bought into the Kickstarter during the first like 15 minutes it was live, possibly even sooner than that, because I received one of the first batch of headsets, the very first shipping of them that went out. I was like unit 760 or 70 something
Wow.
of it. Yeah, and so that's what and then I just kept checking back on it through the rest of the day as the number went up and I was like, "Wow, a lot of people love this idea. This is I'm going to get to." And it was wild cuz like I'm in grad school for experimental electronic art. I'm literally set up perfectly to just pour my everything into experiencing what this thing can do. So
Did you hear about what Valve was doing? What was your introduction to Valve's take on this?
yeah, so what's actually funny about that is that I had fallen back out of VR for a bunch of reasons. Like a lot of it just had to do with like what I was doing to pay the bills and the contract work that I was doing. And there was actually a contract job that had been to do some environment art for some indie folk who were making a VR game that they were trying to get together for the Vive launch, and they needed a 3D artist who could work in a particular style. And I inquired because I was just like contract, just to like pay the bills. And they were like, we need someone who has a headset. So, because some of the visual effects and just the experience of the environment shape. And I was like, I don't have one of the like modern ones. So I reached out to some contacts and was like, how can I get one of these early headsets? Managed to get one. Didn't end up doing that contract because it was just I wasn't the right aesthetic of artist ultimately for what was needed for it.
You're talking about a Vive Pre, I mean, a Vive
Mhm.
kit?
Yeah, Vive Pre. And essentially like decided because I had when doing in the cave era had done a rail shooter where you actually had hand tracked guns that you reloaded. To the best of my knowledge, I'm the first person who ever did that with VR is make a reloadable hand track. They weren't quite realist, but they were definitely more real than the other stuff that I had seen other practitioners do at the time. And I was like, I'd been using Unity very intensely and doing a lot of personal, like game jammy work that was very physics centric. And I was like, well, let's just see where the technology has gone in between, between here, and built that test scene, made my first things. And I was like, I should, people are talking a lot about VR stuff. I'll just put up YouTube video of that and got way and posted it to Reddit, which I had barely been a Redditor at the time. And from a posting thing standpoint, and got like way more attention than I was ever expecting. Kept doing videos and there was enough interest in those in those early weeks, like literally just people being like, I'm gonna Vive on this date, can I buy what you have? And it convinced us as a group to like sit down and be like, all right, this is a short period of time, can we get something cohesive enough together to post as an early access game? Early access was still a fairly new thing on Steam, and the rest is history. And of course you could see the entire history of hot dogs, horseshoes, and hand grenades from that very first video as on my YouTube channel.
Before we start talking about present and future, I got to ask you about SOSIGs and why you don't shoot people in your games. What was the thinking there, and uh, how did you arrive at hot dogs?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that I always need to give like credit where credit is due, but like, within our team, Adam, who is our world builder, writer, designer, is was very, very adamant that there was semiotic meaning behind all whatever it is that we chose to do, and that this was a worthy consideration, that it's very easy when you're especially leaning with something that is a sandbox, that it's very easy to think of that as being a meaningless space or a space that exists somehow outside of meaning or implication. And this is just simply not true. Every creative decision you make means something, it can imply something, it is situated. And so for us, the idea of to put a person in a narrativeless space, in a I'm in an Earth space, and there's a dude standing there, and I have guns. However you choose to represent that person, you are saying this is a shootable person. This is a person you should, as a player, shoot and enjoy shooting. And that was just not the thing that we were interested in making. And so the early decision to sort of like to make something farcical, to make something ridiculous, to sort of like run with what we had already chosen within the title of the game seemed like a natural fit. And that character that eventually evolved through several generations, like the first hot dog shaped combatant in the game was explicitly made to be akin to a amusement park robot, basically. Like, howdy, partner, I'm just a hot dog. Like that was the first version of that character showed up in a game mode of ours called Worst World, where essentially you have come upon the remains of a failed amusement park that was themed around like Wild West gunfighting, where like you just got a gun at the entrance after punching your ticket. So this, of course, closed for safety reasons the very same day it opened. And so you're just in the ruins of it. And there's just these like hot dog animatronics being like, howdy, partner, welcome to Worst World, just sort of walking around. And so that then solidified the like, okay, making a combat agent that you fight, that while it can still be dramatic, it can still be stressful, you can still have a real gunfight with it, is preposterous and it's funny and it's ridiculous. And that was a rich experience. You know, there aren't very many comedy games, but I certainly love almost every one that I play. And so that existed as sort of generation one of the sort of like of the Sosig bot. And then the Sosigs, as I made a second generation version of them that were going to be more sophisticated, that were actually like made of meat. You know, the goal was to sort of like to continue and deepen that sort of relationship. Especially as we added fidelity, we made a thing like, you know, I still remember the first weekend I was spooling them up, and the first thing I did is I made it so they could stand, and then the next thing I made it so they could fall over, and then I made it so you could shoot them and some mustard would spurt out of them and links of them that would blow up. And I remember I was in the indoor range, I just shot one in the head with a revolver and it went and fell over, and I was like, that felt like killing something. That was like way more violent than I was expecting it to be. And I was like, okay, I need to immediately make that not feel like murder, because that just was not it. Just even from a selfish standpoint, I just don't want to sit around making something where it feels like I'm just murdering something for 7-8 hours of the day. It's not a headspace I want to live in, making any like doing a job. And so that very night I recorded the first set of sort of Sosig lines where I just pitched up my own voice and had them just delivering like, way to go, champ, like just all sorts of ridiculous lines that like made it very clear that they were not in pain. And there was no hard feelings, that this was not, that even if this was play, that this was not like, I'm shooting some things that I hate and they hate me back, but that it was something that they are within the same magic circle that you're in. And that has guided me since. And it's right at the core of the soul of the game.
Yeah, there it is. That request comes up a lot. You must hear it too many times to have human enemies.
Less now. I think they've largely given up. Every now and again, you get a very confused person who just strolls in, who doesn't know the history. And they're like, wait a minute, all you can do is shoot these hot dog people. And everyone's like, yeah, isn't it great? And they're like, oh, you guys are weird. And they leave.
You haven't even officially launched version 1.0 of Hot Dogs, Horseshoes, and Hand Grenades. You're still in development of it to some degree, right?
Yeah, we are on the experimental phase of our 1.0 update, which has taken longer than anticipated, but largely just because of the fact that we're doing some user-generated content tools. And the moment you release a tool like that, people will start uploading things with it. And so it's got to be perfect, or you will poison your workshop or your ecosystem with incorrectly authored data, or data that has to be discarded because you've changed the tool. So you have one shot to make that right. And so I decided we'd originally wanted to have the 1.0 come out for our 10th year anniversary on April 5th. And I realized like back in late February, I was like, this is not going to happen. Like what we'd have to do to press this out right now would be to make, there's no reason after 10 years to rush this sort of thing. And so we're taking the time that it needs to get that last little bit where it needs to be.
So that it's close, but it's not quite out yet. Still in early, and you'll take the early access label off when you do 1.0, or you're
Yeah.
gonna keep it on
Yeah,
there.
we're gonna
Okay.
take it off. There's part of me that would just love to leave it up for forever because that's funny, sort of thing. I mean, it's been funny for quite some time. I mean, I even making videos about the coming 1.0, the number of comments that have been on the YouTube, they've been like, "Wait, you mean it's not already been like the 1.0?" Or people being like, "It's okay, buddy. It's been done for a while now. Like, you can stop." So the community are really good shits about it.
So, the community being really good. So that's the context behind this, because I have to imagine some shock. I was shocked when you told me what you were doing. Why don't you break the news to our audience then, for people that don't know what is coming from Rust LTD?
Yeah. So hot dogs, horseshoes, and hand grenades too. We're doing it again. Yeah, we're 10 years was not enough. And so we've been working on it in secret for a while now with a significantly larger team than we have ever had for something. And it is going to be run on standalone VR, which is a first for us. We have never made something uh for that form factor. And yeah, it is a full-fledged sequel. It's not a port of H3.1. It's not like a subset of H3.1's functionality that's been stuffed down. It is a full-on game. And it's a full-on game that's the central axis of its identity is not a sandbox game. It's a full-blown immersive FPS. It's built around a tactical extraction roguelike, but obviously a whole bunch of the stuff that has been central to H3, which is other types of game modes, other ways to play. There are still sandboxes. There's an entire certifications and training section of the game. There are a bunch of classic light gun game style challenges you can play. And even the central game mode can be played on this very sliding scale between a very hardcore extraction game, resource management style, or something significantly more arcadey.
How did this game get made? How do you end up making a sequel before 1.0 of the first game is officially out the door?
So the development of, I think I'll start with talking about what I would call late era H3VR. So our community, our game has been blessed by the fact that there was an explosion of Unity game modding that happened across the entire ecosystem because a bunch of generalized tools that could be applied to basically any Unity game came out. R2 Modman, Melon Loader, essentially this ability, the way in super short, the way the setup works is that it allowed people to make these mod modules that hot load as the game spools up. So instead of having to modify the installed files of a game on disk, which was brittle and would break every time that game updated, instead the mod files are basically packaged to inject themselves into the game when you literally go to run the game. And so it improved the user end experience and the modder's experience of modding for all Unity games instantly. You know, like H3 had some mods here and there over the years, but they were very difficult to make. They were very brittle. Every time I updated the game, they would tend to break. It wasn't a very good thing. And then all of a sudden, it was like a Cambrian explosion of mods, and modding happened. A number of people built some incredible frameworks for other people in the community to use. The downside, however, and this is just like the double-edged sword of game modding, is that the moment that occurs, you suddenly have this iceberg underside side of random software developers and content creators who are authoring something on top of what you have made, and you have no idea whether any given thing that any decision, any piece of code could be load bearing suddenly to something someone else has made that you have no real way to inspect and be aware of. And so, as a creator, especially a creator who had spent a very large amount of time authoring recklessly, where all I had to be worried about was whether or not what I made compiled and still ran, I all of a sudden had to reckon with dozens of other people making things on top that I could just, and many times since that moment, I have accidentally broken things. I have learned things about how C# works from being like, I thought I did this correctly, and things still broke for this mod over here. And because that mod is a dependency for hundreds of other mods, all of those mods broke, kind of thing. So I would be lying if I said that my relationship as an author and as a programmer to H3, like one way inexorably changed the moment I didn't get to have the same relationship to my creation in the same way. I had to, and even though the mod community, by and large, there was only ever a couple people who were crappy about it. Almost everyone would be like, break whatever you need to, Anton, and we'll fix it. The modders were fine. A lot of the people who ran those mods were less understanding. Because, I mean, this is this super nuanced thing. A lot of people don't have literacy. They're just like, my game is broken, and I don't know why. And so, it's why I created the sort of alpha and experimental branches so that I could do more difficult work. But that entire transformation that happened a while back, coupled with the fact that there was so much code, there was so much that I had built in the past while I was learning to be a programmer. Talk to anyone who's worked on a game for this length of the time aggregatively, and they'll tell you that it becomes exponentially harder to change anything, to add new features, to play with ideas. The same thing that you were really passionate about early in the project and built the product's value early in the project suddenly is a thing that becomes higher and higher and higher cost, and it makes it less enjoyable. You can no longer act an author as freely. And so I had a couple prototypes I had worked on in H3 where the brick wall I ran into was, no, I would have to fundamentally rewrite core parts of the game that would break every single mod touching that stuff in ways that would require substantive rewrites. And realizing as I kept running into this over and over again that I no longer had a thing that I could continue expanding. It's that sort of like realization of the mortality of one's project, of one's ongoing art project, of like, this is just getting harder and harder. And that game, for a whole host of reasons, is stuck on a very old version of Unity. Who knows how long Steam VR will even support it running. Hopefully they'll do it in perpetuity or for a really long time, or someone will be able to emulate it, but you never want to count on that. And I've diverged technologically significantly more and more as time has gone on. So there was definitely a moment where I was like, okay, I should start putting more of my effort into whatever that next thing is. So I go through this long period of time where I'm like, I don't know what the next thing is going to be. I made a whole bunch of prototypes that no one has seen or will ever seen. Some of them were flat game prototypes. Some of them were VR things. I was looking at the VR market, but especially as someone who's like PC side, and all of my literacies are PC side, Steam side, etc. I was like, this is not the same environment. And frankly looking at it and I don't know if I have the energy to Iron Man out another early access thing in this same way. I don't know if that would even be a successful product. And then a series of opportunities happened that made me consider another option and realize that there was another option. And as I said, there was a period of time where I was like right on a knife's edge of like, do I make another VR thing or do I try to jump into the standard indie game ecosystem? And I would summarize what happened as being I realized just how much I was trying to make my flat games be like a VR game and tried to get as much VR-ness into them. And I had to look at that bluntly and be like, this because you just want to be making VR still, so keep making VR.
So I think now is probably a good time to bring up that I think this is fair. Yeah, I'll see how you react to this if you don't think it's fair. But I think you're famously anti-meta. I think in the community, you're one of the most outspoken anti-Facebook, anti-Meta people. Is when I still used Twitter, I became to rely on knowing that any new thing that Meta or Facebook did, I could go see what Anton thought of that new thing that Meta or Facebook did. It became a yeah. You were so reliably in supportive of PCVR and down on what Meta was doing with standalone. Who funded this game, Anton?
Meta is one of part of the resources of this game, a significant part of it.
How did that happen?
So how it happened to sort of like go to the sort of beginning of the story. Doug of Creature, who are the label that we have been working with, was part of the reason is the reason that I ended up landing on let's do another VR thing. He brought me out to Reboot Blue. He had put together a VR tract. He'd assembled a whole bunch of people in the sort of European sphere who wanted to do some talks about VR and just like have a weekend of community, and had suggested I come out and go to Europe for the first time and just like immerse myself in the community of practitioners that was there. And I did so. I absolutely got bitten by the bug again. And during that period of time, there had also been a person or two from Meta who had come out as well. And I had ended up chatting and getting to know them during the process, and I think that had been the sort of first moment that I had had in ages chatting with someone directly from the company who basically felt the way I did about what made good VR and what was compelling VR, to find out that there were some people inside the company who were still there since the early days who still held a bunch of those passions, and it made me curious. And they had basically like not grilled me, but definitely had been like, are you going to make a standalone thing at some point? And I had always, how to put this? Had always been a very easy thing for me to go like, no, this is clearly not a thing that I'm going to do with H3 for a host of technical design and hardware reasons. Like it had never been what I would describe as a real choice I was faced with, because H3's code base was Steam VR from the beginning. Doing another project, like I couldn't port 3 the way other people could port their games. And what we were doing from a complexity standpoint, the physics, all of the gun stuff, the visual effects, etc., was not going to run on no amount of engineering help would have made a port of H3 work on a Quest 2 while still being recognizably H3VR. And a whole bunch of the things that that I disliked about standalone as a trade-off at that time relative to my own priorities were all true. But with the Quest 3 and 3 and then 3S coming out, and having, as I said, some like really positive interactions with people there, it was something that we were as a group willing to entertain and feel out, especially because like we had never as a group even imagined the idea of having a funder for a project to begin with. This was all unfamiliar territory. So I would very much describe the process, like the road into it, as being like curious, a little bit skeptical, and like letting that process go one step forward, talking with more people, and ending up having like an incredible experience at each stage of it. And then putting together a pitch, an idea of, because especially like, as I said, like a port was never going to be feasible for this. I investigated it a number of times, and every time, like I had several prospective porting partners actually evaluate the project and be like, what would it take to bring this up to, even just to get it up to modern Unity before the process of squeezing it down? And all of the cost estimates were in the like, you'd be better off starting over. And so that also sort of like, well, I guess it's time to make a brand new thing. And yeah, and so we took a whole bunch of different ideas and prototypes and a bunch of resources that we had that had, it's like even H3's development is a sort of iceberg. I have a backlog of content that is partially finished, prototypes, things people have never seen, a lot of stuff people will never see. And so a whole bunch of those resources were reconfigured into a new form. And once we had a solid pitch and it was getting traction over there, I began the process of basically hunting for the team to make that happen.
So I want to hear about the team. I also need to have this visceral experience with my audience of just what? Like just how did this happen? I mean, we're both Star Trek fans and I have to imagine there's other universes where you leave VR. Like you stop, you don't make another VR game. How real was that possibility here? Like if this didn't happen, are you done with VR?
I mean, I'll be frank, like, I didn't have a plan B that felt like a good idea. I had some promising prototypes that would be interesting flat games, but the reality is there's one entity in the space that is significantly financially supporting the creation of new content. Um for it. And, to be perfectly frank, I didn't want to just do another thing roughly. Like I've already spent a decade of my life making something out of like twigs and duct tape and string. Like we had like H3 was a very, very, very low budget project for a whole bunch of its life. And I wanted to, and bluntly put, to do something for standalone is a much larger engineering challenge, especially if you want to push the envelope to do something really complicated. And I know how much the expertise of colleagues that I wanted to work with us on what they cost and what that was going to take. And so yeah, this was the only configuration of a type of VR game that and it's where I think things are needed the most in the ecosystem. You know what I mean? People want more big, meaty games. They want a game that has a high skill, so regardless of how accessible the game is, has a high skill ceiling. They want a game, people want things that they can put dozens to hundreds of hours in, and that's a significant production. And so, I don't know if that fully answers your sort of question, but yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's I'm trying not to bait you with these questions, right? Like I'm trying to be, like it's I'm trying to gather the shock of people that this happened, and also the realism of what you're saying, right? Nobody funding games in the space but Meta. What is it, so there's a couple themes here, right? Like if you go back and look at H3VR, 20,000 reviews, you covered that already, overwhelmingly positive on a shoestring budget, to your point, right? Like what's the team size for H3VR1?
So that varied. That's a difficult question to ask because we're talking about a 10-year period of time. Because it's always been, there's
At any given time, how many people are working on it?
I would say if you somehow averaged the curve of that entire 10 years and asked how many full-time people were full-time person hours, like that person does that for 40 hours a week sort of thing, probably like sub two.
So you're averaging like 1.7 people, like
Yeah,
humans over the 10
one
year.
1.7 full-time humans, but with tremendous spikes. So like it would be
Yeah.
we do a game mode, everyone would come in, we would work very intensely together on that game mode for that period of time, ship that, and then go back to like Anton just does bug fixing for like 2 months and like it trickles in guns
So
sort of thing.
you are the backbone of this game, right? You're the one person, and then there's a whole bunch of people averaging out as the point 0.7 over a 10-year span. So it's what I'm
And
trying to
mind you,
grasp
I do
here.
want to mention that that's definitely that I don't want to undersell that, like that is in the like the workhorse portion of it. That isn't the entirety of keeping a company going, all of the website stuff, all of the externalities of, the the vision of our larger creative process. That's just when I describe that, I do it when a layperson thinks of who is working on a game, they think about the people stuffing people into Unity and assets that go into Unity. So I want to clarify that.
That's fair, and it's a good context, right, for anyone that might not know how this works or the size of gaming. What I'm trying to paint a picture of is in many ways, you knocked it out of the park with H3VR, right? Like there's nothing else like it at its scale of such a small team keeping this audience happy for a decade plus, right? Like it's such a thing, but it's one, just this handful of people, you and your little band of team that you're able to keep with you and pull in to help you on your project.
Yeah, and of
So, what
course, licensed assets, donated assets. We've had an incredible amount of support over the years from just 3D artists who have seen the project, been inspired by it, and been like, "Here, would you like a fully complete 3D asset that, that took me several months of my life to make?" That occurred from the very early on. So it's very difficult because I've always been the face of this project, and there's that central tension of the way in which when you're the face of the project, people are like, "This is a solo game." Solo games basically don't exist. Like, we're all working on this like pyramid of things, and like this entire project is what it is because I am part of a family of 4 people who have been creative partners now for way too long. And it's like, how do you set, like, it's very even difficult to separate, like, are we always working on the game? We are having sort of like endless intellectual design based conversations. And so but that isn't super visible to people on the outside, all of those different things. It's challenging from a perspective of credit. It's challenging from the perspective of the way that other people think about it
well,
externally. But and so that's why I always want to make sure to clarify those sorts of things, that like H3 has always been a group work, and I'm just the idiot who decided to put his face out there, but also just like sit and play making H3 as my favorite video game for 10 years.
so what is your team that you're able to pull together for this game?
I mean, I'm so proud of our team. I refer to the folks who've been inside the sort of like circle of getting some secret information as we've worked. I describe this as just an absolute rock star team. We have Zach, the creator of Vertigo and Vertigo 2 and Vertigo Remastered. We have Mark, who created not just created Gravity Lab, not just and has ported Gravity Lab to maybe every single VR headset that any company has ever released. If you've never seen his HMD wall, it is something. He has a museum inside his workspace. So, we have people on our team who have tanked, who have Iron Manned out their own one person games and bring that sort of like broad spectrum expertise. We have the creator of some of the most important mod tools in H3's community on our team, Nathan, who has been just like an incredible part of the community, has done a whole bunch of miscellaneous stuff for us over the past couple years, and is a general developer on the game and is there to make sure that everything that we are doing architecturally in the game is thinking about the needs of future mod support when we get to the point of putting a mod framework together. We have a whole bunch of firearm artists who have worked on and off with me over the years. Stefan, who's been with us forever. Ole, who is the author of like some of the most sophisticated sort of late H3VR1 simulation systems in the game, the like night vision and scope systems that are in H3. Those are his work and his obsession. Yeah, and we've got a number of other folks who have come from other parts of the VR ecosystem, who worked for other studios doing environment art, doing VFX work for us, modeling character asset stuff. My longtime SOSIG artist is still with us. I love talking about Ben because he has been continuing the path of becoming a doctor, and he does this. He makes doctor by day, SOSIG fashion artist by night. And so I always love to joke that if the game fails and this it proves to be a misadventure, at least we can say in the end that the process of all of this meaty nonsense has helped fund the creation of one more doctor for the world. So, but yeah, and we're still working with our longtime sound designer and composer Joe, and yeah, it's wild to be able to have a team of this size working full tilt on things. And apologies, I do not have sufficient working memory to know if I gave everyone a shout out who deserves a shout out. So if I have omitted someone, I apologize because I don't wish to repeat myself. But everyone knows who they are, their commitment. I've got a team slide that I actually show in one of my featurettes because I wanted to make sure everyone's face is up there.
People who have been nodding their head along with you over the years on PCVR, what should they expect if they go and buy this game or if they go and buy a Quest to play this game?
I think their experience is going to be like, wow, they got this working on standalone. I don't understand. Like, pretty much everything is better. The guns are more complex. The SOSIGs look better. The VFX are more complex on them. Like, I don't understand. I hope it feels like magic to them. The small number of people that we've given early access to try it out. Like, I've got a couple colleagues who I've sent little video clips and screenshots to over the course of development. And the repeated question that I've gotten back was like, wait, that's it running on the device? That's it running on standalone? Be like, yeah, that's what it looks like. We got, guns still look gorgeous. They're the most interactively complex virtual firearms we've ever put together. And thanks to Zach, I mean, everything about the SOSIGs is better. Their state system is more complex and we'll be able to expand it better. Their vision, they're no longer four solid shapes that are like a little wooden toy. It's one contiguous body. There's actual deformation damage decaling on it. That's part of the thing that's incredible about starting from scratch with a clean rewrite is actually going like we did 10 years of experiments of work and we know now, like we spent a hilarious amount of the early development of this game just building tooling to force maximize our team and get more out of our effort and to make sure that every single one of these systems was architected for the future and built really, really well instead of what they were in H3, which, as I said, was just like, let's throw more things on the pile for years and years. So that's the central thing that I hope an H3 player comes in and experiences and goes like, wow, this feels so polished. This feels so advanced. I cannot wait to pick up the next gun and see how they made that one feel and sound. You know what I mean?
When this game launches, there's, a world where people aren't drawn back to their headsets. They don't buy headsets to buy this game. And there's a world where the opposite is true, where people go and brush off a Quest 3 or a 3S and put batteries in those controllers for the first time in potentially years just to try this game. And then there's people who potentially buy the headset just to play this game. Which of those worlds do you think we arrive at? What do you think happens when H3VR2 actually hits the market?
I mean, it's my job as game director, right, to always play the cheerleader with these things. My opinion with VR as it currently exists, especially in standalone form, is that this is the coolest game console that you can possibly get. And so I'm always telling folks that when I, chat out in public, oh, what do you do for a living? Oh, I make up game developer. Oh, what kind of game do you make? Oh, I do VR stuff. Oh, really? What's that? And then I have the conversation about it. And I always encourage, like, yeah, if you want a thing that's going to like blow your kid's head off, productively in the good way for Christmas, just go get him a Quest 3S. It's a ridiculous deal for an experience that you can't have like any other way. There's just a bananas big library of games to play with it. And so, I don't feel like the thing that the bar that I aspire to is absolutely one where people hear about our game coming out and they're like, oh, you know what? Saw some of the videos of that stuff they did before. I still never have picked up one of those headsets. Oh, they've got a new one that's just for the headset. I don't need to have a PC to play it because I just have my school computer. That's going to be my big Christmas thing that I'm going to ask for, or I'm going to get myself, is I'm going to get that headset because we've always been like H3 over its lifetime has sold more Quests, than any other headset. I'm sure from people, but like the number of people commented, I've followed your channel for 3 years and I finally got my Quest so that I can play it play your game.
We don't know when the game is gonna get out the door, right? Like, you're not talking that right now, but I do sort of imagine it getting out the door before another Quest hits the market. I mean, I don't know, but we'll see what happens there with Meta's, headset release schedule. Everything we've heard is that there's nothing major on the market anytime soon. So you're entering a market with millions of Quest 3 and 3S headsets out there. They just raised the price of these things. So now it's $50 or $100 more expensive than it was to get into VR this year than it was 3 years ago, which is insane. So there's headwinds blowing at you in your whenever you release. But still, I could not be more excited. It's so when I first heard that this was happening, it blew my mind. Like that Meta was backing someone that had spoken so ill of Meta for so many years, that someone who had been so against this entity was now taking money from this entity. Points me personally to the idea that this could be a turning point for the VR market. Like, and as someone who's been wrong so much in the past, right? What do I know, right? No fortune teller. But everything points to me of this, like, if this works, if you do bring people back to headsets and you do sell headsets, it's a new, the foundation is here for building something much, much, much greater into the future. And that's part of what Meta did this last year was point out, like, killing the team that made Asgard's Wrath 2, right? They're pointing out that third-party developers are the lifeblood of the community, that people are putting enormous money into these third-party games. And holy crap, here is one of the games that was considered PC only, that was like, this has to run on a PC, and we're funding you to have a real team go and put it on standalone. And to be clear, you're not running on Quest 2, right?
Correct. Yeah, no, as I said, there's no amount of engineering expertise that could make what we're building here run on that device.
So again, that's what I'm trying to say on this foundation, right? Like, here is the beginning of stacking something very real for the future. So, like, whatever benchmarks you achieve, my hope is that next year, and the years after, you get to build with a bigger team. You get to start stacking more and bigger games, and the whole market starts shifting. Do you share that dream? Do you have hope in your heart right now? You already said that you got to be the cheerleader of this, but where's that skeptical Anton that was there for 10 years on Twitter?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that you pair those things together. Is that like, yeah, it turns out when you sit on on algorithmic feeds that fill you through, that are like primarily centered around like people formulating their thoughts to construct engagement, which is frequently conflict or doomerism or what have you, that gives you a really negative outlook on life. And, I pretty publicly have gone through several different stages of stepping back further and further and further from feeds, because I realized that even in circumstances where things were going very well within my domains, I had this like warped, worse view of it, I genuinely thought things were worse than they were, or was simply burning cycles when I could have been creating, when I could have been supporting other people, when I could have been taking care of myself. And so yeah, it's like, of course, anytime you're like anyone who's making a video game who has paid any amount of attention to any market knows that this is a high risk endeavor. It is not always possible to perceive what causes a thing to catch or doesn't. Like, there's lots of things that can derail a project, a team, what have you. All I can confidently look and say is that we have tried our absolute hardest. We have a team of incredibly enthused experts who are working together to a degree of frictionlessness that feels spooky at times. Like, I love our team, and our team all work together incredibly. And so we've thrown our absolute all into making this. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't, like, I can look back on it confidently and be like, we stepped up and took the like strongest two shoulder swing at this humanly possible. We've pulled no punch with it. There are no half measures. We have tried to do the most difficult, productively difficult, because it is the most exciting rendition of what this idea could have been. And I have confidence, as I said before, like, this is the coolest game console you can go buy. And so I have confidence that the A plus B pairing of that is going to find success. And that you can look at the Quest market, and there have been recent releases that have really resonated with people. And it turns out those releases are either about a lot of agency and messing around, or they're about like just having an experience that you can imagine playing for hundreds of hours. And those are the types of games that we love to make, is deep, rewarding games that are about long form engagement that you can make your home in. That, like, H3VR1 is this game that, like, we've had tons of people was like, yep, this is the only thing I still play in VR, or I bought VR just for this, and even really bother looking at everything else. And we want to make sure that we're making something that if someone decides to pick up a headset just for our game, that in and of itself made that a worthy purchase for them. And that's always been my effort and desire.
You've got both teleport and smooth locomotion, is that correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I've been doing VR for 20 years now, and I cannot do smooth rotation turning for more than about 4 seconds before day ruining nausea happens. There are smooth locomotion modes in H3 that when I test, I literally cover one eye to remove stereo because it's less likely to provoke it. And I like leave the headset canted up on the top of my cheeks just to make sure that it's less, so I have sort of like grounded context. My brain doesn't try to fuse it. So it's, we really care about that accessibility, and the type of game that we're designing can work for that. Not every type of game or genre can. Ours can. And so we have definitely prioritized that. There are other members on the team who are like, they're teleport only VR people and always have been. So, and that's important.
Is there anything else about the project right now or about the future that you think people need to know?
There's going to be some people who have never played a VR game who are jumping into this. H3VR2 on the store does not care. It does not bother to really instruct you much about anything, because that was a game that was created at a moment of VR enthusiasm, where pretty much everyone coming in was hyper literate. They knew what was going on. They were watching YouTube videos. You could count on certain things from the average user in 2016 that you cannot in 2026. And so I would say that one of the big differences that we're doing now compared to the original game is that, like, there is a very managed onboarding experience in the game, but it's both narratively letting you know about the context that you're in with it, but is actually ensuring, like, do you want to set your locomotion mode options before you move anywhere? Like, here are your hands, here is what is going on. And then we also have an entire sort of vertical in the game called the certification range that is step by step voiced tutorials for the core concepts of the game, and then all of the individual classes of firearms in it. Because this game has the spirit of a sim, even though it is an action adventure game and has a lot of these sort of traditional gaming genre elements to it. It has the interaction soul of a sim game. And so when I put a firearm in your hands, I want it to operate as close as possible to the real thing. And some people are going to come in with a ton. Like, the average gamer's firearm literacy is much higher than it was 10 years ago for all sorts of reasons. But if you're not a shooter game person, I'm sure it's give or take the same as it was 10 years ago. So we want to make sure that we're inclusive of those people and give them a place to learn that isn't going to talk down to them, that just is like, here, this is this type of weapon. Here's what these components are called. We do this step, we do this step, we do this step. Now practice it. Hey, while you're practicing, here's a couple fun facts about this type of firearm that you might not have heard of. And then I list a couple fun facts. So it's designed to be it's not just a dry tutorial. It's meant to be a learning space that's fun. And so that's it's one of our gameplay pillars here, that is recognizing the fact that the audience now that is dominantly in VR is not the same in 2016. You have to meet them where they are, and there are strategies you can employ that are about bringing them up to speed so that you can get them to the level of facility in the game to be having an incredible time.
I think I gotta ask one final question here, and we've
Yeah.
covered it, but I have to figure out how to word this question because it's kind of me asking, but it's also me imagining some people in the community asking this question when they hear that Meta funded this game. Um, did you sell out, Anton?
I mean, that's a question that is primarily for someone external to me. That's always a determination I think made by other people. There were things about, that how to put this? Trying to imagine how to refer this. Does it mean something to take money from an external entity as an artist? It absolutely does. There is some component of like authorial control that you no longer have. Like I can't just put like I could like in H3 1, I could put the most if I just woke up on a and had a bad day, I could put random incendiary content in that, and the only real ramification that would be there would be like negative reviews from people. To have a funding partners, to have a set of responsibilities to a partner, and that changes something fundamental about making a piece of art, and that does matter. Has it negatively shaped what we've chosen to make here at all? I can honestly say no. Like, I would be making this same game if that money appeared out of the ether, sort of thing, and landed on a table, except that I might not be making this game in a productive way had I not had to go through the process. Like, there was a lot of things about the process, like you're required to do categories of things when you have a funding partner that's about framing and presenting what you're making in very many steps to them, that's about reassuring them and about communicating what you're attempting to make to them. And at the beginning of this process, if you had asked me, like, what do you think about the process that you're about to engage in? I would have probably complained, like, why are we having to do these lists of things? We have to jump through all of these hoops. And it's been a humbling experience looking back and being like, man, I'm really glad we had to jump through most of those hoops at the dates we had to, because it forced us to make really like it was a constraint, and it was a constraint that forced us to actually just make and commit to certain decisions at certain times. And like, that can be really, really useful as an artist. So,
Mm.
if the act of selling out and having a funding partner that enforces something about your creative process is this, then it's a process that I think has resulted in a better thing at this stage of development than if I had just been authoring it in a vacuum. And it requires a sort of uncomfortable humility to stand there and be that, especially as someone like myself who has always been an iconoclast, who has always been a like, I'll do it my way. And if anyone has a problem, they can, stick it. They can cover themselves in mustard and jump into a giant bun. I don't, it's in the exact same way that like you learn tons of things, being in charge of a team of this size. This is I have not had a as dense a period of recurrent humility and learning as the past, 2.5 years as possibly any other time in my adult life. And I treasure it. And like, am I a different artist? And have we created different things as a result of taking this path compared to other paths? Absolutely. But it's been an immense privilege to do so. And I love what we've come to in the process of doing that. And I think everyone else will end up being like, that's awesome that they got to build this at the end of the day. And yeah, I don't know how much I of course I've got 15 pithy ways that I can respond to it, but they're like, they're not worthy the of the most important central point of it, which is that we were given an incredible opportunity, and we've returned that incredible opportunity by making something that I think should or will exceed any of our partners' expectation for it in terms of its scale, robustness, and the sheer amount of effort that we have put into it. And it's going to be an incredible game.
So there are wish list pages out for Steam and for the Quest store. And so I'm going to be going on to Steam and I'm going to be going on to Quest and hitting those wish list buttons just like everyone else is when I'm not hitting those wish list buttons on almost anything else. And that's just because I want every update and because I want the game as soon as it's out. I can't wait to see more. Can't wait to hear more about the game and to finally go hands on myself. Thank you for the time, Anton, and
Thanks
good
for
luck. And don't fall apart in the last. And going from 95% to 100%. They say that's like a whole nother game, isn't it? Right?
Yeah,
Like it's
it's the second 90% you have to work on.
so good luck. Good luck on that second 90% and also on getting 1.0 of H3VR out the door and ripping that early access label off. So I'll talk to you in the future.
Betcha. Indeed. Thanks for having me.